How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Just gotta get
Good.
my
How's your?
camera.
Sorry.
Just gotta get my camera so it's not cutting off my head. Good.
How's your day going?
Never a dull moment. Let's
Are
just
you
say
watch?
that.
Are you watching the feature? What of the federal legislature right now?
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
What a
So
choice.
yeah,
Either having an election during a pandemic or getting answers on ethics. It's
yeah,
quite a choice.
yeah. Never a dull moment in the media cycle. So
Never a dull moment.
okay, I wasn't going to ask you any questions about that. So so do you think Halton will enter into a stage two light this Friday, closing down indoor dining and gyms?
Well, we're really doing our very best here in Halton to avoid doing that. So our medical officer of health has released some additional guidance. They're recommendations, they're not bylaws. So we're really relying on people to do the right thing. I've made contact with some of the gyms that are chains that have locations in multiple districts to ask them to suspend membership privileges to travel from hotspots to non-hotspots. It was creating chaos in Burlington for sure. We certainly encourage people who are in hotspots not to travel. And whether it's to visit Burlington or anywhere, to support your local businesses, they need you now more than ever. But the virus is spread by people traveling. So the more we can limit travel among jurisdictions, the better off we'll all be. And this is a temporary situation, right? The initial stage two rollback was for 28 days. That's coming up soon. I know it was just extended a little bit, but the longer we can avoid in Halton going into that, and the more people actually follow the restrictions where they are, the sooner we can all get out of this.
True. I know a lot of the other mayors are asking for, well, it's not even the mayors, it's the mayors, the restaurant industry, the gym industry. They're asking for evidence in regards to the closures in PO region, Toronto. Will you be asking for kind of more of a justification or evidence towards if it becomes stage two light on Friday in Burlington and Halton?
Well, everything we have done here in Burlington has been based on the evidence. And so that is exactly what our medical officer of health did. We employed a very strategic approach to closures, very select and only in the areas where there was the greatest risk. We just had a significant presentation this morning at Halton Regional Council from our medical officer of health. There's a slide deck and the whole thing was webcast. Folks can check it out. But the broad strokes is they have been able to identify where transmission, like somebody giving it to somebody else, is occurring, and where acquiring the infection, so where I've gotten it, is largely occurring. And a lot of that is happening in the home. So people are picking it up somewhere and bringing it home and spreading it to their family members. That's the number one source, which is obviously a concern. Restaurants were lower down the list. They were with certainly fitness centers were in there. The top five. I tweeted it out earlier as we were getting the presentation. It's on my Twitter, and I'm just trying to remember what they were now. But we've looked at those top five to say these are the areas where we all need to exercise extra precaution. Certainly, private parties, that was number two. So those restrictions have already been put in place province-wide by the province, and so. That's the approach that we support. I know I talked to the premier on the weekend. I know our regional chair did. I know one of the other mayors in Halton and said, please don't sort of blanket roll back Halton into a modified stage two. Let's look at where the sources of greatest risk are and then put some recommendations and if necessary, some restrictions just on those activities. But a gym is different than a restaurant. If you're on a piece of equipment and you don't think to wipe it down before or after you use it, that's a risk. Whereas in a restaurant, you're pretty sure that the wait staff have wiped it before and after. So there's to treat all businesses just because people gather there as potential risk areas is not the right approach. And that was the message that I gave to the Premier, to say we really support more targeted strategic closures rather than this blanket which punishes everybody equally, if you will. So please don't roll us back was the message. And so far that has been heard. And our biggest sources of outbreak right now are long-term care, congregate settings.
So what, you had a conversation with the Premier himself,
Yes.
and what did he say?
So we talked about stage 2, and they're obviously looking at it very closely, looking at it very seriously, and he won't hesitate if he thinks it's the right thing to do. He's talking to our medical officer of health and other medical officers of health, obviously in the province. But he's also talking to us, and we are representing the voice of our residents and the voice of our businesses, and really advocating with the health evidence that not all areas are equal in terms of the risk factor for transmission. The evidence is there. And so, and he's seen it. And that's why I think we have been able to persuade him, based on the evidence, to have a more strategic, targeted approach to those risk areas, and talking very closely with our medical officer of health. And we've of course amplified that message. She, for example, recommended that there be no team sport play, so no scrimmages, no games, no game type practices in or outdoors. And so we've canceled all of those on our city fields, indoor and out. And it's tough, I get it. That's just one example where we have, and the medical officer of health didn't direct us to do that. The province didn't bylaw that for us or legislate that for us. We are doing that voluntarily. And so that is the approach that we're really hoping to keep here in Halton, where we look at the areas of risk, we voluntarily take the steps that we need to so that we can protect those businesses that really can continue to operate and have done for some time very safely.
So hopefully the dreaded Friday presser that Doug Ford does, and we'll not have Halton in a rollback. Okay. So are you concerned about the COVID-19 numbers in Halton? I noticed they've creeped up a little bit. I think, I don't have the numbers today, but I think there were 42 yesterday in Halton.
And I think it was a little over 30 today, yes. So of course we're very concerned. And even more concerning is the spike in people over 80 that are at 70% greater chance of dying from COVID if they get it. And those are the folks that are in our long-term care facilities, those congregate living areas. And so, visits have been suspended where there are outbreaks. We have several of our long-term care homes in Halton that are under outbreak. Tansley Woods has been devastated recently by this and has had 3 deaths now. Very, very tragic, difficult situation. We have to do better to protect our most vulnerable people living in these areas. So again, targeted restrictions based on the areas of greatest risk, and that's the concern, is the spike. If you look at the numbers, we have about 91 active cases in Burlington. It's hovered around 90 for the last couple of weeks. It's really 3 main sources: long-term care, some team sport, hockey, and a local plant, Fearman's plant. If you add up all the infections in those 3 areas, you're over half of, you're well into the majority of cases here in Burlington. So business to business in terms, or facility to facility, and we're trying to hone in on the ones of greatest risk.
I'm going to go back to a topic that you brought up before. You talked to the gyms, you said, right? What did the major gym franchises say to you?
Well, I know some of them have and I can't say it's because I called them, but my message was, suspend your membership privileges for a time. Tack it on, make good later, do whatever you got to do so that people won't be traveling from hotspot areas to non-hotspot areas to take advantage of gym memberships. It's also creating massive crowding, and that in and of itself is an issue. People lined up, outside for long periods of time. So some have voluntarily, as of last week, a number I've heard from the community have voluntarily suspended those. But it's spotty, right? There's no consistency. Some refuse to do so, and I can't order them to. We can only appeal to their goodwill and to their sense of community and doing what's right.
When the mayor calls, you do it.
I'd like to think so, but no, it doesn't work at my house either.
I'm sure you get a lot of calls, direct messages about gyms and restaurants. What are they saying to you?
Keep us open. They need to stay open. Some of them, we've lost some already through this pandemic. Some of them are just hanging on. And despite the supports that we've put in place, that the province and the federal government, we're in a global unprecedented pandemic, and a lot of them were on the margins to begin with. They did it out of love for what they did, and it wasn't so much about making boatloads of money. And so when your margins aren't that big, and you face what businesses have faced now, a rollback would really make it difficult for some of our businesses to survive. So again, we're really hoping that doesn't need to happen to keep us safe.
Let's talk about some good news. You guys have Brock University coming to Burlington. Tell us about that.
They are. So this has been a dream of mine since I was elected in 2010, is to bring another university, especially some undergraduate type program, get a foothold in that market. And so we've been discussing with Brock, I would say the better part of a year or more, and even before that. But I think a new council, a new group of folks at the table that really saw the benefit to Burlington for having a post-secondary, having the students, having the jobs, having a ready workforce. That was one of the things we heard during my red tape, red carpet task force, was the need to have a steady supply of workers. So it's the Faculty of Education. I know our school boards are excited about this. And, it's awesome. It's great. And we are working very closely on a location, and we'll have an announcement soon about where they're looking to set up shop.
Another reason for me to move there. Okay.
Best city in the country. I keep telling you.
What's the latest on the testing situation in Burlington? Anything new there?
A lot of that, as you know, is governed by the province. So we got an update from our medical officer of health today at regional council, and the message still is we need to really save resources for folks that are symptomatic, as well as our frontline and emergency personnel. So if you don't have symptoms, you're being asked, but you think you might have come into contact, you're being asked not to get tested right now. And that's kind of province-wide. That's not just in Burlington. Continue to respect the appointment. So if you make an appointment, show up. If you don't need to show up, cancel. So be respectful of that. And but yeah, that's no change really in that prioritization of testing resources at the moment.
Cool. Let's talk about the ranked balloting system. That's not going to happen. You supported the ranked balloting. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I support the municipalities first and foremost, having the choice to do what they think is right for their community. I will always support local choice. The larger conversation here is about municipalities' right to self-determination. We're creatures of the province. That needs to end. that's a carryover from, you know, 100 years ago. We really, so it's really that conversation, whether we would or should do ranked ballots. We still haven't even had the conversation with our community. We had just teed up an opportunity for us to go out and do some public consultation. And if, you know, depending on what the discussion was, it would tee us up to implement it for the 2022 election. Or we could put a referendum question on the ballot in the 2022 election. So all of that hadn't been determined, but we were really keen to have a conversation with our community about it. Every other community that has had a referendum has had a majority of support for ranked ballots. But they don't meet the threshold as defined by the referendum, because you need to have 50% turnout in a municipal election. And I would ask somebody to tell me when in the last several decades there's been more than 50% turnout in any municipal election. We hover around 40% in Burlington, but the average is about 35 to 39. And that's true across Ontario, it's true across Canada. And so when you say on a referendum, any question you put on a referendum ballot that mandates legitimacy based on 50% turnout is going to fail. That's not a reflection of the merits of the question. It's actually a really poor commentary on our democracy and the fact that we aren't able to convince people that their vote matters. Ranked balloting might help with that. You know, that's one of the discussions, that your vote would count, because if somebody doesn't get a majority right out of the gate, they count the second choices, the third choices. And so I think there's a lot of merit there. It's worth a conversation is my point. And so the province with what they have come out with have said, we don't even think you should talk about it. And that's not right. They've taken choice away from our local voters to determine for themselves. That's not right. So they will be getting some very polite and diplomatic correspondence from me to say, come on now, let us decide what's best for our communities based on conversation with our community, which we haven't had yet.
You know, I love our conversations, because every time I talk to you, I feel like I'm getting educated. So thank you very much. I've learned a lot just from ranked balloting for you. There you go. Thank you. I always tell that to everybody. I feel like whenever I talk to you, I feel like I'm getting educated, enlightened. So.
Well, my job here is done then.
Okay. Interview over. Okay, I'm kidding. It's only 18 minutes in. Halloween, the thing that pretty much took you know, the press by storm this week. It's every single question to Trudeau, to Doug Ford has been about Halloween.
Yep.
You guys are not in the hot spot yet. If you guys are, right? I mean, so what are you guys doing for Halloween?
Well, I can tell you what, personally, we will not be handing out Halloween candy. My kids are older. They're not old, but they're past trick-or-treating days. Let me just say that. But you know, it's really up to people in our community to determine what's best for them, what's best for their family and their kids. And the medical officer of health did release some guidelines. I really hope people follow those about if you're going to trick or treat, individual packaging, keeping your 6-foot distance from each other, still wearing a proper mask. The costume masks aren't a good enough barrier. But the biggest thing that I would like to ask folks is please stay in your neighborhood. There are a couple of streets in Burlington and addresses where people, you know, go to town on Halloween, and they attract thousands of people, and we can't have that happening this year. The residents themselves have reached out to me in some of those areas in the city to ask me to send the message on their behalf, to ask other people not to come to their street if they don't live there. Some of them are going dark. They're just not even, they just can't even take the risk that thousands of people will show up. And that's unfortunate. But if you do go trick-or-treating, please stay in your own neighborhood. Please observe the precautions. If you choose, there's lots lots of amazing creative alternative ways to celebrate Halloween this year that our community are coming up with. And we do have the community support fund at the city to help give you some money for that. So some are still decorating. We decorated. I spent the weekend putting up our decorations, which is great. The local kids come by and they love it. And so it's kind of Halloween for a couple of weeks. It's like Christmas lights. So we've extended it beyond just the one day in our neighborhood. And I know my neighbors will do Halloween walks around the neighborhood and see the progression of different people putting out decorations. So there's lots of ways to still celebrate. Halloween is not canceled. Halloween is not banned, but it will be different, and it needs to be different. So think about what works best for you. Everyone be kind, not judgmental, and please follow the guidance from public health, and please stay in your neighborhood. If we can all do that, it'll be a great night.
Good. Let's talk about one of my writers is saying, ask about the Nelson Quarry expansion.
Yes. So there is a proposal from Nelson Aggregates to expand their quarrying operations to the north and to the west. There's a golf course and a spectacular green space there right now that I know that is well loved and well used by the whole community year round. So they've applied to do some quarrying activity there. So this will require multiple approvals from multiple agencies: City of Burlington, Halton Region, Ministry of Natural Resources, and so we have just put out, myself and the Ward 3 Councillor Rory Nissan have just put out some information via a newsletter. It'll go on my website as well about the process. And we've got a process map of what comes where and who gets to decide what when and how the process and all the different agencies come together. It looks like a bit of a plate of spaghetti when you see it, but it's a great graphic that breaks down all the different groups that will have to weigh in and in what order. So eventually Burlington City Council will be asked to take a position on this based on our review of the evidence, but we're farther down the process. The Niagara Escarpment Commission actually gets first crack at it, and if they say no, then it's just done at that point. So I can tell you that when we review this application, top of mind for council and our staff, and I know the residents, will be the impact on the environment in this area. It's a World Biosphere Reserve. We have lots of sensitive ecological activity up there. The last time there was a proposed expansion from Nelson, it would have compromised the habitat and breeding grounds of the Jefferson salamander. So it was stopped for that reason. So there's a lot of technical reports that have been done, a lot of issues, and top of mind for us is the impact on the environment and the people who live there.
I saw in your stories that Remembrance Day is going to be a little bit different this year, correct?
It will be. It will be virtual. So we'll be live webcasting. The Legion will be, as they always do, they take the lead and the city provides support. So there will be a very small group of people at the actual cenotaph. I'll be there to represent my colleagues on council, but to really represent the public and show our support as the Burlington community. But the Legion has requested this, and this is nationwide. Legions are saying that they are not, they do not want, and they are not supportive of the large in-person Remembrance Day ceremonies. So they're finding alternative ways to do it. So this is a request that has come directly from our Legion that we are respecting, of course. So we're asking people, please don't come down to the cenotaph, but you can follow along online. So please do that. It would be great to see a lot of people tuning into that virtually and participating that way. And of course, within about a week or so, we'll all be able to wear a poppy, and you can do that for more than just the Day of Remembrance. We want to show our support for our veterans before, in the weeks before that. And that's a fundraiser for them too. So it's all good.
Cool. And this is the part I ask you, is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Oh boy, well, trying to think, what haven't we talked about? We've got budgets coming up. We had a big day. There's paper that has just been released, a discussion paper at Halton Region. So we've talked about the downtown and the pressures of overdevelopment downtown, and one of the causes of that was that the downtown was classified a major transit station area and an urban growth center, and those two designations have been really used and misused to justify wildly inappropriate overdevelopment. The City of Burlington Council and staff have asked the region to look at those two designations and consider removing the MTSA designation entirely from the downtown. Our little bus terminal really doesn't cut the definition of what it means in provincial legislation, and then shifting the urban growth center boundaries to more closely align with our GO station boundaries. And we're the only urban growth center in Halton that is not already on a GO line or a priority transit corridor. So that tells you something. So we know our future growth is, that's where our future growth is. So that discussion paper was just released and approved to go out for public consultation today at the regional council. It's really good, very detailed in terms of the rationale. There's the, staff go through, here's the status quo option, and then here's the preferred, which is the changes I mentioned, and residents have until December 22nd to get your feedback to, it's ROPR, Regional Official Plan Review at halton.ca. You can tell me too what you think, but we are, you've got about 2 months now to have a look at that discussion paper. It's about 50 pages long. Lays out all the studies that have been done to support the changes and the rationale for it, and some questions for people to answer. So I really encourage people. This has, again, been something I've been working on and thinking about for years. And to see it come this far with all of the evidence behind it is really another great day. It's another tool for us to control development in our city, which is what we want to be able to do.
Cool. One question for you. Have you checked out the new website, Quick Bite News? Quick Bite? Our new website now is Quick Bite News.
I have not. Thank you for that.
We brought in Halton, in the Hammer, and in Brampton together for one mega site.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're doing about close to 10 million page views a month, so we needed to upgrade a little.
Wow.
Yeah, so please check it out.
I will absolutely check it out. We can talk about it next week.
All right. Cool. I think it's been 30 minutes now.
All right. Thanks a lot, Khaled.
I'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Everybody.